welcome to the session Navigating the Green Shipping Challenge, Reality versus Reality. My name is Manik. I'll be moderating this panel. We've been joined by three distinguished speakers, each bringing direct operational and strategic experience. It's Xanthos from Columbia Group, Alex from Dorian LPG, and Mikkel from Teekay Tankers. May I request each panel if they would like to briefly introduce themselves and their positions in the company. Xanthos.
Thank you, Manik. My name is Xanthos Kyriacou, and I'm with Columbia Group. Columbia is an integrated maritime logistics, leisure, and energy services platform.
Thanks, Manik. My name is Alex Hadjipateras. I'm COO of Dorian LPG. We're a liquefied petroleum gas carrier listed on the New York Stock Exchange in 2014. And we also have a joint venture with Mitsui OSK called the Helios LPG Pool.
Good morning, everyone. Mikkel Seidelin at Teekay Tankers. I'm the CCO, Chief Commercial Officer there. Teekay Tankers are mainly in Suezmaxes and the Aframax space. Been around for about 50 years. And we're listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker of TNK.
All right, thank you. Let's dive in. Question for the panel for the first. What's the most persistent practical barrier your company is facing right now in complying with the environmental regulation and boosting energy efficiency across your fleet? Mikkel, would you like to start?
All right, thanks. I think the biggest challenge that we're seeing is the uncertainty of it. A lot of these changes are, of course, well, the uncertainty of the changes from a regulatory point of view, and the high cost of effecting these changes as we go through things. I think there's things we can do that we can prepare. We can do a lot of things in terms of retrofitting our vessels, and so I'm sure we're going to go into that later on. But the uncertainty, in short, is probably the thing that's the hardest to manage, because you can only get so far on being proactive and planning things, and but if you don't really know where the next steps are coming from and how politicians, and I think just in recent months we've seen a lot of changes to the landscape that we couldn't really foresee just 4 or 5 months before this. So I think the uncertainty is overall the biggest issue.
Of course, I agree with the uncertainty and lack of consistent standard and regulation going forward. I think also there are many things that we can do and we are doing right now with energy-saving devices, with optimization, with AI and weather routing. So there are many low-hanging fruit that we're able to take advantage of and realize savings of at least 7 to 10%. Looking forward, I believe that it's important for incentives to be aligned. So we want to see the engine manufacturers and other technical developers sort of progressing in line with some of the other developments, but also to have a reasonable transition, something that makes sense, and to stay away from labels and sort of buzzwords.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what has just been said. If we want to, in a nutshell, we say that this is inconsistency in ways of regulations. We are operating in a global environment. We have vessels trading globally, some vessels on TCs, some vessels on on the spot. So we have regulations. We have on the one hand fuel EU, then we have other places where there are no regulations. So we have to blend all this in and find ways of operating our vessels and be compliant. Said that, we also have to consider that there is no clear, as Mikkel said, a clear understanding of the regulations, and in the sense that things change. We saw that in IMO, when we had the IMO summit 2-3 weeks ago, where we say, okay, now we shift for next year. We discuss again the carbonization and net zero and so on and so forth. So we have to think of, this is quite challenging, and we have to think of ways of making sure that our vessels are compliant, and we at the same time operate our vessels efficiently and effectively.
Thank you. You are in the senior management of the companies, and with new fuels, technologies, and efficiency tools on the table, how do you prioritize where and when to invest, and how quickly do you expect rollout to make a meaningful difference? I mean, given the transition.
Where to invest? That's, if we start with that, it's always more when. I think we see a lot of technologies actually ready. If we're talking about if ships' engines running on zero emission fuels, they do exist, of course, and they are being built, and ships are being delivered that can do this stuff. I think that's not really the blocker. The blocker is really the availability of fuel, and which kind of fuel are going to be readily available. That's more the, and that doesn't lead to necessarily how to invest. It's more the when, because it will come one way or the other when some of these new fuels reach a tipping point. But the issue really being the availability of the fuel, not just in general in the market. And I think that's interesting overall in that respect is that this is probably the first time that you're shifting. Well, first of all, it's the first time when we're shifting from into what is arguably a less efficient and more costly fuel than what we're used to. It's also probably the first time where the shipping industry is not using fuel that is readily available ashore. We're trying to create fuels that are being forced on shipping is not actually commercially viable in society as a whole, contrary to in the past with coal and heavy fuels. So I think it's more to trying to see what fuels are going to win the shore side, because that's going to be the fuel that's going to be readily available, and then be able to take advantage of that when we see those tipping points coming in. So for us, it's more the question of the when compared to what it is right now still.
I agree. It's more of a wait-and-see approach. Sorry, Alex.
Yes, it's more complicated than that, but in short, yes, I guess you can say that. Yeah.
Alex?
Well, we have 21 LPG carriers, and about 20% of the fleet is operating on dual fuel LPG. We also have a ship delivering next year, which will be dual fuel LPG, and it's around 17 to 18% better on a well-to-wake basis versus conventional fuels. But I would say, looking at where to invest and how to invest on a more generic basis, of course, there are options and opportunities available for maybe cleaner fuels, but it's important that the customer also, if you are to look at a time charter, pays you for that or it makes commercial sense. So it's not just wishful thinking. So I think from a commercial decision, that's very important. And then, of course, fuel availability is a big point, and I would go back to what I said in the introduction, that it's very important that as we transition, especially to 2032, 2035, we have that fuel availability there, and that it's commercially available for commercial reasons and not just because it's subsidized.
Xanthos?
I will not talk about fuels because I think we have covered it. I would just say yes, the supply chain is broken. So when we say fuel, and we had this discussion with Khalid a couple of weeks back when we were in the Saudi Maritime Congress when we spoke about fuels and availability, and I said, guys, I mean there I don't know how many ports around the world in remote areas, so the supply chain, until we have a proper supply chain in place, that will be a struggle. So on your question, Manik, about technologies, we have to basically see that from two different angles. First of all, we have to see and consider these technologies should be affordable, first of all. So they should make sense in ways of investment. They should be proven. Point number 3, they should be regulatory compliant. So when we look at these new technologies, and we have new technologies, we use digital solutions to capture data, to measure the emissions, to optimize the performance of the engines, and so on and so forth. We apply new coding on the paints and so on and so forth. On top of that, we have the second angle, we should break it down into short to medium term and then long term. On the short term, The first point is that we use digital solutions which are available today based on today's technologies to capture the data and optimize the performance of the vessels, the voyage planning, the weather, we monitor the weather, etc., etc. On the midterm, we prepare our vessels to be fuel compliant for the future, so methanol ready, ammonia ready, and so on and so forth. On the long term, and from Columbia Group's perspective, we partner up with startups, with universities, maritime universities, and others who are focused on science and new technologies, and we try to see what they are working on in ways of R&D, and what technologies they could come up in the next 5 to 10 years. I was last week in Saudi, and we visited one of those universities, and it was an eye-opener for all of us. The things that the academia is working on at the moment, it's really impressive, and I would ask everyone in this room to go and talk to these universities and see what they do and what solutions they can offer, as I said, for the long term, for the next, for the next decade.
Right, thank you. Do you believe that decarbonization is something your company can achieve on its own, or would it be coordinated or ecosystem effort, or what kind of partnerships would your companies focus on?
Yeah, I think as mentioned before, you can't do it by yourself. I mean, ship owners, they do a lot of cool things, a lot of innovative things, but we're not fuel makers. So you need to have a net zero fuel to be able to reach complete decarbonization, and I don't think there's a lot of ship owners that are making their own fuel. So no, it can't be done in a vacuum. It can't be done on its own. A lot of things can be done, of course, in that respect, and I think it's encouraging to see what the industry has done so far in terms of actually building a lot of ships that are able to run on fuel that doesn't emit any carbon. I think what would be interesting to see then, to encourage more of that behavior, to create the demand for the zero carbon fuels, would maybe to see these taxes and these tariffs coming in on emission. Maybe it should be considered to have the ships that are actually able to run on net zero fuel, to whether they're running on that fuel or not, to be exempt from these taxes, because the intent has been there, the commitment has been made to create the demand, to make the fuel, or to make the ships able to meet whatever requirements comes up in the future. But if you're still being penalized with taxes and on emissions, etc., it takes some of the incentive away, and then it's up to the fuel makers of the world to make sure that the fuel is actually available, so that the assets can be used in the right way as they're being done. So now it can be done. A lot of things can be done, as mentioned before. A lot of owners, they're spending a lot of time, money on fuel efficiencies. So a lot of it can be done in isolation. We were fortunate in the way of our integrated model, so we know exactly if we put a little bit of capex in, or a lot of capex in, as it has been over the years, to retrofit various fuel-saving devices, we will see it directly on our bottom line. It's a much simpler calculation when you control the whole value chain. But to get to that zero, you need input from the fuel providers, you need input from the fuel makers, and we're not one such. So hopefully that will change in the future, in the years to come.
Of course, you can't do it alone. And as the panel was saying, I think you need class, port authorities, manufacturers, ship owners, and these efforts have to complement each other. So we work with the Maersk McKinney Center for Zero Carbon. We work closely with different class societies on looking at the ships of the future. I think that collective effort is the key here.
Absolutely. We also have to consider that, apparently we cannot go solo. We are on the same industry, we are on the same boat here, so we have to make this work. And if I follow up from what Tim said before, yes, we will get there, definitely. The shipping industry will get there, like other industries will also get there, say, for example, the automotive industry. But on top of the class societies and etc., we also and the fuel makers and the engine makers, we also need the regulators. The regulators should make up their mind of what they want and how they want to do it, and by when they want to do it. This is point number one. On top of that, we need governments. We want states to come into the game and offer subsidies. Like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Let's look at the solar panel industry. I mean, the governments came into the scene, and then they said, okay, we will offer subsidies, or we give tax incentives, and so on and so forth. So we need this. We need this also for the shipping industry. It's no difference. And everybody is looking now, the spotlight is on vessels, but there are all sorts of polluters out there. So we have to be really strong. We have to come up as one voice, all of us, managers, owners, class societies, and we should go, hey guys, this is what we want, so please help us doing it. And we will do it, we'll get there.
As all of your companies are making efforts and concrete initiatives, joining the corridors and discussing the problems, from your perspective, is there a first mover disadvantage versus being part of this consortium, in the sense that you all are making initiatives, trying to meet the regulators, class societies, trying to be in the corridor to discuss, but it's all the shipping companies in one consortium. Is it something like a disadvantage if you are the first mover versus being part of the whole voice of all the companies around?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wouldn't say it's a disadvantage. I think there's a lot of benefits of being the first mover. You do learn on the job, on the task, so to speak, with whatever. I mean, I guess when a first mover in this context, we're talking about being ahead of the regulation. I mean, when it comes to regulations, we all have to be there. We can't really. You can't be too early or too late. You just got to make sure you comply. And being a first mover in terms of how do you comply accurately and competitively, that there's definitely a benefit of being a first mover on that. If you're talking about the first mover on the fuels or the assets themselves, it's probably more complex whether you benefit from being the first mover. Some of the first movers that we've seen in using non-conventional fuel. I'm not privy to exactly their ROI calculations on it, but I'd imagine it probably would have disappointed a little bit so far. But at the same time, they would have some experiences that others who hadn't made those moves would not have. So I think the calculations are probably still being made on whether they're being the first mover, having that experience, having that knowledge of new fuels, that change management into changing into new fuels, that still is going to have some values on it. And trying to work with regulators when they actually have new ships on the water that can burn these different kind of fuels. How does fuel suppliers react? How does regulators react? How does customers react? I think that it's of course it's a gain. There's a benefit from being a first mover that is harder to measure. But I like to think those companies would have some experience in that respect that others do not. In terms of the straight up, you get a ship on the water that can burn an unconventional fuel. Yeah, maybe the return is not going to be there right away. But I think that calculation hasn't. That experiment is still running. So time will tell.
Alex, you differ or do you agree?
Yeah, I don't think it's yes or no. I think going back to LPG, Equinor was the first company to come out with a time charter for LPG fuel engines, and they would support the development of those engines with a contract. So in that case, we did bid on that contract, and we had no issue being a first mover. On the other hand, many LPG fuel engines had a lot of technical issues, and there was a huge kind of supply issue with sourcing the spare parts for those engines. So first movers there suffered for 2 or 3 years not being able to perform an LPG when in many cases it was cheaper. So, I mean, again, I think you go back to the economics a little bit. Would we pay 10 million more for an engine without potentially having a time charter? No. But there is, of course, a lot of technical knowledge, and then you position yourself in a better place going forward, depending on the philosophy and identity of your company as well.
Thanks. What do you think about Columbia Group?
It's a yes and no. When you are the first mover, yes, you take risk. Basically, you don't learn from others' mistakes. You do your own mistakes. But then, of course, you have the advantage that you are one step ahead from the competition. So it's always a give and take. It's like if you are the first one, 15, 20 years ago, and you bought a crypto coin for, I don't know, $50, maybe people were laughing at you, but now you are sitting on a piece of crypto coins and you are, you're retired. So it's always a risk. Yes, we are doing our tests. We are trying now to, or we have implemented, and we are working with some new fuels, and we are monitoring, and we see how it goes.
Okay. Looking ahead, what single factor do you believe will turn the green shipping ambition into real measurable action? And what needs to happen to make that factor scalable and sustainable?
You're saving the easy questions for later here, Manik. Thank you. No, I think, as I mentioned, I think in the starting point, I think the technology and competitiveness around zero carbon fuel, I think is the key thing, along with clear regulations. I think, and the technology that will come when that's ready and when it's economically feasible for the fuel manufacturing. On the regulation, I mean, my guess is as good as anyone's in terms of when we're going to see more clarity on that. I think it's a concern right now that you have different regulatory bodies weighing up the carbon benefits or carbon lowering benefits of different fuels. It's not being applied consistently. I think that would be a good start for one. So I think the regulatory clarity, I think that will go a long way, and then we need the technology around the fuel manufacturing. I think the engines are ready, so it's really just a matter of the fuel manufacturing, and again, and those two things. If the regulations are clear, then the incentives to create the fuel, of course, becomes much clearer as well. I think there's probably too many paths to the same destinations right now in terms of the net zero goals. Some clarity around that, either, and whether it's globally or regionally, ultimately it matters, but in the short term it probably doesn't matter. It'll just be good to get some consensus around what is a future-proof fuel and what is not.
I think starting backwards, we have to look at where we want to get to, why we want to get there. You have to look at the life cycle of the fuel. Again, I don't like buzzwords or labels, so I have an issue with this term green shipping. I think picking up on what Prakash said on the first panel, we have to not pat ourselves on the back, but acknowledge all the steps that have been taken to make ships more fuel efficient, improving designs, all the automation, AI, all the other aspects we're taking. I think ship owners sometimes always get the spotlight put on them, but it's very important for the spotlight to be also on the shore side and the manufacturing side. And then, of course, a consistent standard that's realistic, and the fuel supply, I would highlight.
Thanks. Xanthos?
Looking ahead, before looking ahead, we have to see what can we do with the fuels of today. Now we have fossil fuels. We have to find ways of making these fuels more green, because it's what we have today, and this is something which we can do without investing millions of dollars. And I gave an example a couple of weeks back, and I will repeat it. For example, if we look at the automotive industry, to have an engine producing 100 horsepower, 20 years ago, you need a huge engine. Now you have a small 2-liter engine, or even a smaller 1.5 liter, which is tuned and can produce 250 to 300 horsepower. So we should come closer to the engine manufacturers, and then we can see how we can make our engines of today more efficient, because now the vessels which are built today have a time life of 25 to 30 years, it depends. And then looking at the fuels of the future, we need to make sure that we meet two parameters: proper supply chain across the globe. Second point should be economically viable fuels. So we cannot bring fuels into the play which will cost thousands of dollars, because who will pay the price? The consumer. Shipping industry moves parts, televisions, fridges, medical supplies across the globe. So we need to make sure that these goods arrive to the consumer at a competitive price.
Thanks. Mikkel, Alex, how do you see the backward compatibility of older assets versus new builds in your fleet?
Sorry, can you come again, Manik?
How do you see the backward compatibility of the older ships versus the new ships, given the transition to the new fuel?
Provided the same fuel, of course, the consumption of older vessels on average is higher, and that, of course, leads to higher emissions. Fortunately, the market has been quite strong in the last couple of years, and then some of those considerations goes a little bit out the window when the market is tight. There's a lot of initiatives you can do. I mean, one of our fleet's average age is around 14 years of age in the Aframax and Suezmax space, and so it's a little bit above average, we have to acknowledge. But there's a lot of things that can be done to abate this. We spend a lot of money on retrofitting hardware on the vessels, better paint, various different fuel-saving devices over the last 10, 15 years. And it hasn't always, that's the other thing, it hasn't always been an emission goal. Fuel is expensive, as most of this room knows. Sometimes that's enough or most of the time that is enough to focus on fuel savings. I think we've done a lot of both on the older and the more modern vessels, we've done a lot of the heavy lifting on the hardware around the vessels. A lot of the retrofits that can be done has been done. So now we're down to making sure we get more out of it using the data, make sure we collect better, cleaner data to optimize. I think, Alex, you mentioned before around the weather and the routings, make sure that we don't use a ton of fuel that we don't have to use. And that is probably the last sort of frontier that we see right now in terms of managing the older ships. But for sure, you can make a non-eco tanker more competitive by fitting all these things on, but you can make it an eco ship. But you can make it a very, very good non-eco vessel.
Thanks. That's insightful. Thank you, Alex.
I would echo those points. I think in our case, we have taken 8 ships also, and although they were designed to just carry LPG, propane, and butane, we've also enhanced them to be able to carry up to 86% ammonia if this trade emerges in late 20s or 2030s. So that's one way we can make them more competitive. Then, of course, silicone paints, all the retrofits, using automation, digitalization, and then, when it makes sense, of course, renewing the fleet.
Yeah, it's a combination, of course. First of all, we have to use digital solutions to monitor the performance, make corrections as needed. In Colombia, we have our so-called One Link platform, by which we are trying to optimize the fuel consumption and the fuel bunkering, the lube consumption, the lube bunkering, the weather routing, and so on and so forth. This is a proven model which we are pushing now across the board in other applications as well. And this is one of the points. Also, we are also building ships which are methane ready. I don't want to talk about ammonia. I think ammonia is a bit dangerous, and I don't think that ammonia will be the solution of the future, but I'm not an expert on that. Yeah, and that's about it.
It's amazing to have views from three different large shipping owners. Just because we are in the Middle East, and Middle East is not just a shipping region, a major bunkering and energy supplies region, which means transition pathways, alternative fuel production, and logistics have particular relevance. Do panelists see Middle East hub for alternative fuel bunkering?
Oh, definitely. I think the Middle East has always been providing marine fuels at competitive levels for many years. And with the investments that we see in the regions going into renewable energy in general, and the potential there, both the amount of investments, as I understand, going into it is very significant, and as what I understand, world leading in terms of really trying to make meaningful change in developing new renewable energies and so on. And you have this energy hub already with massive refinery parks, and again, as mentioned before, providing marine fuel for many years to come. The infrastructure is there. You have a lot of trade lanes going around the region as well. It's only natural that the next fuel and the bunker solutions that for whatever fuel comes next is heavily going to be involved in the Middle East region. That's definitely the way we would see it, and we would anticipate it, and we're very much looking forward to that as well.
Alex, what do you think for Middle East?
Well, as is evidenced by Bahri Week and Dubai this week, I think it's great to see all the collaboration and people coming together. And then from a energy perspective, it's great to be, same as Houston, the U.S., to be somewhere where energy makes a difference to people's lives, and you can see that also in the livelihood. And that means people have skin in the game also in looking at the transition and looking at how economies will develop. So to those points, yes, I think it's a great example of collaboration here, and it is a great area for the sources to improve and accelerate going forward, because people have a direct role and goal in seeing that happen.
Xanthos, what do you think for Middle East, Columbia Group?
I couldn't agree more, and this is why we are pushing a lot in Middle East. We see this to be the next hub, not only for bunkering, but for ship management as well. We had last week the launch of our new joint venture company with Abu Dhabi Ports by the name Noatum CSM. So we are pushing a lot to create a big base here in the region.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Right.
Maybe some closing comments.
I guess we can just summarize. So we heard the challenges, but also the pathway. I would say let's work together on turn green shipping ambition into real action. And do you want to say something to summarize in the end for a message to Middle East or message to the other ship owners and charterers, Mikkel, to end the session?
No, I think just no overall message, but I think it's still going to be a fun ride. I think the shipping has come through bigger challenges than this. I was asked a similar question on a couple of months ago on another panel, and how do we deal with this energy transition right now and all the different regulations? And I think the answer was from a Teekay perspective. Teekay's been around for more than 50 years. We adapted to all kinds of different things, and it's still here still around and doing well. And we're going to find a solution for this as well. The only thing I was asking for at the time, and we will continue to request, is that these regulations and these coming up and being proposed towards hopefully a greener future, what we want to make sure is that these different rules and regulations, they can actually be enforced by the bodies that are trying to implement them, to create a level playing field for the industry. I think that's very, very important. And once that's done, then we're happy to tackle any issue, any challenges coming our way, and we're looking forward to it.
No, just of course, aspirationally, would love to have the transparency. If we're sitting here a year from now, that's a big thing. Also touch on the human element. I think it's very important in the shipyards and then also on our vessels that acknowledging the role that labor plays, and it's increasingly more difficult for shipyards to find the right workers there to help build these ships of the future. And I am an optimist, so of course look at it glass half full, but don't want to be naive and just hope that things get better. I think these types of discussions are key in getting the right stakeholders around the table and making progress.
Yeah, some closing comments also from my side. We have to consider what has been discussed. Now, the industry is going a transformation period. We are talking about green shipping. We have to consider two things. First of all, there should be economic and policy alignment. This is very important. We cannot just ask owners to invest millions and millions of dollars for transformation of their vessels, transforming their vessels. We have to consider the economic impact. That's why the regulators should come on the table, and they have to understand how the industry operates and how many different players are working together to bring, as I said, the fridge from point A to point B. And there should be a balance. There should be a balance between policy, ambition, and reality. Whatever we do as an industry, we have to make sure this is realistic. I cannot wake up tomorrow, when someone wakes up tomorrow and says, "Oh, I want by 2030 the ships to fly on the surface of the." I mean, we have to consider that there are technologies which we are working with at the moment. There is R&D, there are innovations coming in, but it will take time. We'll get there. I will just close the same comments that Tim Coffin, what Tim said earlier. So we'll get there, but we have to be realistic. Ambition is one thing, reality is another thing. We have to blend this in and make sure we bring the result on the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.